I remember I'd been laying on my couch for days. And so I grabbed a book at one point and I tried to read and I couldn't focus on the words on the page. It was just swimming all over the place. And it was a friend that came to visit that suggested that maybe it was our home that was making us sick.
The Ready Life, into the country.
Hi, I'm Nick Meisner.
And I'm Lisa, his wife.
And we want to welcome you back to the Ready Life podcast, where you'll get the essential tips to make your home and family as independent as possible for basic necessities like water, food, heat, and the power that most of us depend on for these things. And in this week's episode, we're talking about something that's really close to home for Lisa, and that is environmental chemicals.
You know, I was 11 years old when my folks decided to move out of the city and into the country. And I'm pretty sure I thought at that time I had died and gone to heaven. I loved the country. I was a bit of a tomboy, so if you couldn't find me, I was likely up in a tree. So I was really excited about this move. It was a raw piece of land, 10 acres. So I got to watch the whole process, the septic system, the power, drilling the well. I got to watch the whole process. Well, my parents weren't made of a load of money, and so they shopped around and found that the cheapest way to get a home on our property was to purchase a modular home. So they had a little bit of a budget, so they ordered a custom double wide or double modular home. And I will never forget the day when the home was delivered to our property. We had been camping and tenting pretty much the whole summer and into the fall, and we were late September in northern Michigan. So we were ready to move indoors. And they hauled the home onto our property and put it together. And then they gave us a little piece of somewhat devastating news. They said, you really shouldn't move into it for 3 weeks. Like, 3 weeks?
It's a long time.
Yeah, especially when you're out camping and it's northern Michigan, not exactly tropical. So, but we did. We waited 3 weeks. They said it needs time to sort of off gas and, all of this stuff. And so we thought, okay, no big deal. We'll make it 3 more weeks. So we did. We waited 3 more weeks staring at this gorgeous house. And we finally moved in after 3 weeks. So we moved in, and within the next 3 weeks' time, all 4 of us got so sick. We didn't know what was wrong. And it wasn't just the common flu, because that lasts a few days, maybe a week. But this was 3 weeks of just downright sick. And I mean fevers and congestion and coughs and rashes. And Mom couldn't figure out what was going on. I couldn't focus. I remember I'd been laying on my couch for days. And so I grabbed a book at one point and I tried to read and I couldn't focus on the words on the page. It was just swimming all over the place. And it was a friend that came to visit that suggested that maybe it was our home that was making us sick, since we couldn't seem to beat this thing with natural remedies or anything that we were doing.
And it had been how long?
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
We were in there for 3 weeks. Well, she probably suggested it before the 3 weeks. We were in there for a total of 3 weeks. The end of 3 weeks, we moved out and in with some friends. And over the course of the next several months, we learned that we had experienced environmental toxicity overload. And so, this toxic overload that my family experienced, it took a toll on all of us.
From what? Toxic what? Where did the toxins come from?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, we didn't know anything about any of this when we first had this experience. And so the education that happened over the next several months was phenomenal. We contacted the company that we'd bought the house from, And they came back real quick and they were like, oh, it's all in your head. We're like, no, it's not in our head. It's, I mean, look at this rash. Look at, the headaches. And, one of our family members even started coughing up blood. It was serious. It wasn't just some common little thing. They said, well, I don't know. It's got to be in your head because there's no formaldehyde in the house. Formaldehyde kind of hit the news back during, what was it, down in New Orleans, where they had all those double wide homes that they gave to all the people, and everybody started getting really sick. So what they did was they removed the formaldehyde from the homes and replaced it with a laundry list of other toxic chemicals and preservatives to make it, quote, safe and not toxic because there's no formaldehyde in there.
So did they test your home?
So they actually came out and tested our home for formaldehyde only. And indeed, there was no formaldehyde in the home. So we hired someone to come out, and there was a laundry list. I believe it was about 36 different chemicals, or 34, I can't remember now. Different chemicals that were within toxic levels. And they were neurotoxic. They were, like I said, the laundry list was terrifying, and it was all within toxic levels. My dad, he was a hardwood floor man, so he thought, oh, well, maybe it's just the carpet that's making us sick. So he started tearing up the carpet and noticed that the OSB board, the flooring under the carpet, they have to stamp those boards when they press them. And it was stamped with the same month and year that they had delivered the home to our property.
Wow.
So
it was hot off the press.
They literally were hot off the press. And the off-gassing that all of these materials were doing in that home was significant. So there was no end to the environmental toxicity. There was no just pulling the carpet out and being okay after that. And so it was a long court battle, and I won't go into any of the details there, but the toxic overload that especially I experienced affected my body in quite a number of ways. One of the biggest, most dramatic ways was, well, first of all, our family went through a detox program. It took us 3 years before we could function in normal society. And when I say function in normal society, I'm talking about doing your grocery shopping, going to church, like simple things that most of us don't think anything about. As soon as we would go to church and sit in the pew and the person next to us or just behind us was wearing perfume, which was really popular back then, I'd get a terrible headache. I couldn't think anymore. And so we'd just have to slip out of church. Going to the store, it was the same thing. I would rash on my arms very easily, and the headaches were intense, probably closer to migraines than headaches in many respects. And so, it was like the detox thing. It took us 3 years before we could actually go to church and not develop headaches or rashes or go do our own shopping and things like that. But we had a huge education in environmental toxicity from that experience.
Yeah,
but the effect that it had on me personally was the biggest effect was that I lost most of my schooling. Now, I was a homeschooled child, and I loved school. Not to brag on myself, but I was smart, and I learned very quickly. And I was testing in grades way over where I was supposed to be. Because I loved schooling so much. Well, when we went through that toxic overload, that environmental toxic hit that we took, I lost all of that education. I mentioned earlier that some of those chemicals were neurotoxic. Well, that was the effect that it had, was that I lost all my schooling and I had to start over from scratch. Now, granted, my dear mother, she worked very hard to get me back up to speed so that way I would graduate on time, which was a miracle. But still, it was a lot of work to try and play catch up. And for the first 3 years or so, I didn't even realize how bad like that chemical hit had affected me. Later, when I went through puberty, I ended up with a lot of hormonal issues because of the effect that chemicals have on especially women's hormones, but even for men too. But that's a whole nother long story that I'm not going to get into right now. I actually have a little ebook that I wrote where I dealt with that specific issue on hormones because so many women deal with hormones these days. So I shared my story and then I walked through step by step how we detoxed and how I continue to maintain a healthy hormonal balance in my system, even though it's impossible to completely avoid all of the environmental toxicity that we have in our society today. So anyway, that's just a little bit about my story.
Wow.
And what my family went through and the learning curve that we had on environmental toxicity.
Did you ever, well, I mean, obviously you did find out about what had happened, but what I remember you telling a story about when you discovered how much of your schooling you had lost.
Yeah, when we moved out of that double-wide home, all of our stuff shifted straight into storage. All of my school books, all of my homework and assignments and everything had just gone straight into storage. And then, long story short, it was about 3 or 4 years later when stuff started coming out of the storage. My parents wanted to get rid of the storage unit. And so all of my homework, and I had this, back in the day, it was a big thing to have a trapper keeper. Mm-hmm. And mine was a really bright, beautiful Lisa Frank trapper keeper I was super proud of. And I was so excited to see it when it came out of storage. And at that point in my life, I was just starting to learn cursive. I didn't know all of the alphabet yet. I just learned a few of the letters. I could just start to write my name in cursive and things like that. I was just getting back into multiplication tables, and this trapper keeper came out of storage. And I remember opening it and looking at the assignments. They were all written in cursive. I was dumbfounded. Like, it's got my name, but I'm learning cursive right now. How did I write all of this in cursive if I'm just now learning cursive? And not only was in my homework, not only was I doing multiplication, I was already into division and, more complicated fractions and all of that. And here I was just learning multiplication. And I had already exceeded all of my current education. I had exceeded that previously. And so my mom had to sit me down and explain that, yes, you lost all of your education when we had that environmental toxic load. And I had to start you back over at square one. We've done it mostly on paper, but once I got back up to about 4th grade, roughly, that's when she pulled the books back out, because 4th grade was actually where I lost all my education.
Yeah.
I was just going into 5th grade that fall. So
the effects are real of these things.
They are.
Some people think that it's just all in people's heads. And, I probably would have been guilty of the same thing, except that I had a family member that had a different but somewhat similar experience with chemical toxicity, having, just profoundly impacting their life. And for a period of time, people thinking that it was all in their head, these symptoms, but it was real. And then finally came out in very physical ways. And that once you've experienced that, then you realize that people aren't necessarily making this up. No. And that these things, even though they're hidden and you can't see them and it's not affecting anybody else, it can be dramatically impacting you. And I think that the thing that's really important, because you might be wondering, well, what does this have to do with our podcast and the topics that we talk about here? And it's like, well, we're all about getting out of the city into the country and living a more independent lifestyle and things like this, where you can be healthier and happier and freer and all of these kinds of things. And you can move out of the city, you know, in town, you can have all kinds of pollution around you and environmental toxicity around you, but you can move out to the furthest most point of the earth and you can create your own little bubble of toxicity inside your home.
That's
and it's
right.
real. And even if it doesn't seem like it's affecting you, it is.
Well,
And that's the thing.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, because I remember one of the doctors because we went to a lot of different doctors after that experience, just trying to figure out what was wrong with us, because we knew it wasn't in our heads, like the mobile home company was saying. Anyway, one of the doctors that we talked to said, you know, environmental toxicity, you kind of have to picture it this way, like as if your body was a large like barrel, and environmental toxicity is kind of like dripping water into that barrel, right? And we're all exposed to environmental toxicity in one way or another, especially in our society today. And so sometimes we're dumping water in, sometimes it's dripping in, and sometimes it's, you know, evaporating, where, you know, your body is handling it and offloading or detoxing it naturally. Your body is built to detox and offload.
Pathways of elimination.
Exactly, naturally. And so the challenge is, though, when you are exposing yourself to more toxicity than your body can offset, you know, eventually, you know, you're not going to experience symptoms right away. You may go years before you start to experience any kind of symptoms. Once that barrel hits the top and it starts to overflow, then you're going to start seeing symptoms. And those symptoms can look differently for many different types of people because of your lifestyle factors, your genetics, and the environment that you're living in, and how toxic it is, or how well your body is offloading that toxic load. All of these things are factors. And so if you think of it as a barrel, we're all affected by chemicals. It's just a question of when and how much your body is able to handle before it can't handle anymore. And then your body starts breaking down in one way or another.
And you don't necessarily experience symptoms until your body is maxed out.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, we were, our wonderful, blessed government is often light years behind on some things. And so I don't usually consider the EPA to be a great source of information on topics like this. But we just, on a lark, happened to look it up before this podcast to see what they have to say about this. And we were quite dumbfounded at how, I guess, what used to be, you know, 10, 20, 30 years ago, what used to be words that shall not be spoken, they're actually addressing it. And
downplaying it. But still, they're addressing it now.
And I'll just read to you a little bit from this page from the EPA's website.
Well, first of all, let's just clarify terms here, because I'm using the term toxic chemicals or environmental toxicity. You may be familiar with it as VOCs. Like if you're going to go buy paint, you can buy paint that's low VOC versus regular paint.
What's VOC?
And VOCs is basically toxic chemicals is what it is. So you want lower VOCs. VOC stands for volatile organic compounds. Now that doesn't sound so scary.
It's organic, right?
It's organic, right? It's healthy. But it's not. The VOC is actually
organic arsenic, huh?
Yeah, there you go. A very fancy way of saying toxic chemicals. So whenever you hear volatile organic compounds or organic compounds in this article, just realize we're talking about toxic chemicals that are being used. So
yeah. So it says, this is the title of this article. We can link to it down in the description, maybe, in case you're interested. It's called Volatile Organic Compounds Impact on Indoor Air Quality. It says, and I think you'll find this really interesting. We're not going to read very much, but just some punchy parts here.
Yeah.
It says, volatile organic compounds, VOCs, are emitted as gases from certain solids or liquids. VOCs include a variety of chemicals, some of which may have short and long-term adverse health effects. Concentrations of many VOCs are consistently higher indoors, up to 10 times higher than outdoors. VOCs are emitted by a wide array of products numbering in the thousands. In other words, you can be, like I said earlier, creating your own little bubble of toxicity in a pristine wilderness if you want to.
That's right.
And it says organic chemicals are widely used as ingredients in household products. Paints, varnishes, and wax all contain organic solvents, as do many cleaning, disinfecting, cosmetic, degreasing, and hobby products. Fuels are made up of organic chemicals. All of these products can release organic compounds while you're using them and, to some degree, when they are stored. And
I found it interesting. The article went on to describe, like, we all know that pollution in the air is really bad, especially in the bigger cities, right? But what they said was that, like, yeah, the pollution outdoors in our major cities is really bad, but it was 2 to 5 times worse indoors than it was even outdoors. Right. We're talking about the pollution. I mean, this should be a wake-up call. We should really stop and think more about our environment and what we're using and how we're using it and how it's affecting our health. And like I said, you may not experience something right now, but it's building up and it's eventually going to break your health in one way or another in the future.
Right. We're putting water filters on our water systems and buying organic foods or growing our own and doing all kinds of things like this, but then all kinds of other things can be having a real impact on our health. So you're going to get into some of these things, right?
So yeah, we've already mentioned a number of things that contain like higher amounts of VOCs or, environmental chemicals. I'm just going to list off a number of like household items that are known to have higher levels of VOCs or environmental toxins in your home that you probably even use. And then we're going to look at ways to decrease that toxic load in your home. Because there are simple ways that you can do that where, you can decrease it so you're not getting as much of a hit. And then there are ways you can detox the body also to help your body's system of filtration to eliminate that extra load so you keep that water level low. The lower you keep that level, that toxic level in your system, then the healthier you're going to be in the long term.
That's right.
So some of the places you're going to find a lot of toxic chemicals in your home would be like your household cleaners. But I think a lot of people recognize that cleaners are not exactly the best thing to have around. I mean, if you're going to go in and clean the toilet, you want your kids out of the room, you're going to close the door because you don't want your kids. Yeah, I know a lot of moms that do that. Like they'll send their kids out somewhere like, no, I'm closing the door. I'm going to clean the toilet because there's a lot of intense chemicals that we use in our household cleaners. But it's not just the toilet bowl cleaner. It's the all-purpose cleaner. It's the disinfectants, all of those things have a lot of toxic chemicals that affect our system.
The laundry soaps,
yeah, all of our soaps actually, dish soap, hand soap, and even our shampoo and conditioner. In fact, of the two, shampoo and conditioner is by far more toxic than even your shampoo. And your shampoo can be pretty toxic too. But for whatever reason, the makeup of conditioner lends to a more toxic load. So yeah, makeup, facial creams and lotions. In fact, lotion and conditioner often have a lot of the same like chemical loads.
How about chapstick?
No, chapstick is good. And I have a thing about chapstick. No,
I maintain that chapstick is addictive and should not be used.
No. You can get healthy, natural chapsticks, and that's what I use. Anyway, but even deodorants and perfumes, of course, we've mentioned perfumes a number of times. But some of the things you might not think of would be like new clothes, brand new clothes at the store. They spray them or add chemicals to make them look fresh and neat and pretty, because people don't want to go and buy wrinkled, frumpy looking clothes from the store. And so they add chemicals to your new clothes in order to make them look pretty.
I imagine flame retardant.
Yeah,
too,
there's a lot of
perhaps.
flame retardants and things used.
And furniture also for the flame retardant. Yeah.
Furniture is another thing. Mattresses, couches, even your cabinetry. A lot of glues are used in cabinetry work.
What about cookware and things to do with food?
Yeah, plastic. I think there's been more of an awareness created about plastics and plastics being toxic to the environment, but it actually is toxic even in your own home. The fewer plastic containers that you can use in your cooking and in your storage, especially your storage, the better. But even like Teflon pans, they're
non-stick, any kind of non-stick. Yeah.
The non-stick, and they're very toxic. They leach into your food, which is why storing in plastic containers long term is really a bad idea. If there's any way you can avoid using the plastics in your food, that's better. Dairy and meat, a lot of times they use hormones, added hormones to the dairy and meat industry.
So if you're not certain that it's, by organic and reputably, where there's not chemicals like that, because it's been proven that it passes through to the milk or the meat, and
that's right,
then gets processed by your body as if you took it to some extent, obviously not to the same extent that it had on, not the same degree of effect that it had on the animal, but to some effect, to some degree.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So some other ways that chemicals are found in our environment would be like herbicides and pesticides. You get those on your produce at the store.
Food preservatives.
Around, food preservatives also. And then chemicals on grains.
Yeah, I remember when the kids were little, we were eating a lot of Cheerios.
Well, I was really excited because Cheerios went non-GMO. Like they had a great big label and I'm really opposed to the whole genetic modification of our food. And so when I saw this on the Cheerios box, I was like, yay! And I started getting it for the kids, and they were just eating it left and right. They loved the Cheerios.
And we were plowing through them, and I don't remember what prompted this, but...
It was a friend, yeah.
Oh, a friend said something.
A friend
rained on our parade.
He was so tactful about it. He saw my son, like, wolfing down the Cheerios, and he said, I don't generally say things, but I know that if I were you, I'd want somebody to just at least mention it to me. And so he mentioned the fact that...
glyphosate.
Yes. Yeah. What happens is with the fields of oats and wheat and a lot of the grains and beans, you can't harvest them until they're fully dry. And so what farmers will do is...
Sometimes, not always, but sometimes.
Not always, but sometimes, yeah. So in order to harvest your oats and your wheat, you want...
Before
the rains come in the fall, you need your crop to dry out. And so they will spray Roundup, basically.
Glyphosate.
That's what glyphosate is, on their crops. So that way it dries out all at the same time, because that's the other thing, is sometimes the crops will dry out in different places at different times. And so use Roundup, dry it all out.
Kills it
all at once.
It dries, yeah.
It dries, and then you can harvest your grains. But the problem is that, and you can look this up online, Cheerios and breakfast cereals that use grains like corn and wheat and oats, especially oats, they have very high levels of glyphosate still in them.
And you can see this in effect. I remember driving through central Washington where there was an area where there was a lot of grains being grown, and you can see that the field looks dead, and then there'll be a few spots around the edges where the plants are green and alive and well. And it's like, what's up with that? And then you think, oh, they must have gone over and sprayed Roundup or something on this field, and only the edges where they missed are the plants still alive. They were desiccating. That's what it's called. It's desiccating the field. And this is done just before harvest or not long before harvest that this is sprayed on. And so naturally, some of these grains, if it's not organic, it's going to very possibly have a significant amount of that glyphosate or Roundup.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, when we switched, because when I learned that, I switched all of our oats and our wheat and our beans and grains all over to organic, where we primarily use just organic in our home now. And we noticed a difference in digestive issues that we were having. Most, if not all of them, cleared. And so that was a huge blessing. I was very grateful that our friend so tactfully let us know.
And the list could probably go on of things that we could talk about. So how did you detox your body and continue to maintain low levels of these things and try and keep that bucket where it's not full, where it's as low as possible? How do you do that?
Well, the first thing that you need to do is you've got to look at your environment and decrease the amount of chemicals that you have in your environment. You know, I love this illustration. If you woke up this morning and you walked out to your kitchen, right, and you saw the sink was overflowing and the faucet was on and the water's just pouring out of the sink and all over the floor, would you run to your closet and grab a mop? Like, would that be your first gut reaction? Like, oh no, it's going to ruin my floor. I'm going to race to the closet and start mopping as fast as I can.
No.
No, you wouldn't. The first thing would be to stop the problem at its source. So you'd run, turn the faucet off, and then unplug the drain, and then run and go get the mop and fast clean up the floor so you don't lose your nice floors.
In that order.
In that order. Literally in that order. So the same would be true for detoxing. Like, the first order of business is to figure out where you are getting that exposure in your environment and decrease or eliminate that exposure as much as possible. So the first thing is look around your home. Think about like what new or furniture or furnishings you might have included in your home. A new mattress, for example, that one's pretty common. If you didn't get something that was low VOC, which you can actually, there are so many more clean options these days. You can get a new mattress, but not have that huge chemical load. But yeah, just look around, because so many of these have glues and preservatives, and fire retardants is a huge thing. I remember finding a study about fire retardants, and it was connecting fire retardants in baby mattresses and all the baby products to SIDS, yes.
Sudden infant death syndrome.
Yes, there was a big study that was done. I think it was in New Zealand.
It's not conclusive,
no,
right?
It's not conclusive.
Or maybe we should say not widely recognized as authoritative.
But it was done, and in New Zealand, they found a huge difference by just switching those mattresses out, where they eliminated the fire retardants and all of that. So, newly painted walls, new cabinets, new couch or chairs, like, look at them. Unless, even if they're genuine wood, they have varnishes and finishes on them that off-gas. And there is an off-gassing time period for a lot of these items. New carpets, off gas for up to 15 or 20 years. So it takes a long time for the chemicals to completely off gas out. And by the time you go 15 or 20 years, you're wanting to get new carpets again because your carpets are all worn down and they look awful. And so these are things that you need to think about in your environment. There are low VOC flooring options that you can find, even low VOC carpets. They're starting to come out with more and more. So there's a lot of great options nowadays versus the way it was 20 years ago.
But paneling and laminate flooring and things like this, if they're not specifically labeled as low VOC, then they're one of the building materials that often have higher levels of VOCs, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Especially the paneling, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So you might be thinking, you know what? This just sounds impossible. There's no way we're going to be able to get away from chemicals. And that's true.
Not entirely.
That is true. But there are ways that you can reduce the amount of toxic off-gassing that's going on in your home.
Really two things, right, that you can do about it?
Yeah.
To lower your exposure and then assist your body in
the detoxing process.
Eliminating the toxins.
So let me just share with you a few tips on ways that you can detox your home and your environment. In other words, reduce the amount of chemical compounds that you're dealing with in your home. So instead of it being 10 times more toxic in your house than out, it's actually not as bad. So one of the things that we use is apple cider vinegar and baking soda. They will strip those chemicals out of your fabrics and upholstery much faster than most things. So for example, new clothes from the store, whenever we get new stuff, it goes straight into the washer with about a half a cup of usually apple cider vinegar. It stinks, but the laundry comes out smelling so fresh. Baking soda, you can sprinkle that on your carpet and then vacuum. Every time you vacuum, just sprinkle a little bit on your carpet. That's going to help it off gas more quickly. So those are two things that you can do. Buy used or non-toxic furniture or furnishings for your home. Whenever you're going to need to replace something, be conscientious about that and think about what you're getting and bringing into your home. Also, low VOC paint. There is a lot of options now for low VOC paint. When I was a kid, they didn't have a lot of options. They really didn't have much of any options that were low VOCs because it was not a well-known thing. But painter's tip, if you put 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla into a gallon of paint and then you paint, it's still going to be very toxic when you're painting it, but it will off-gas in a fraction of the time it takes for paint to typically off-gas. So, and painters know this. At least they did 20 years ago, because that was something that we learned. And sure enough, it really worked. We saw a big difference, at least. And we were kind of like the canary of like environmental toxicity. So yeah. Another thing that you can do in your home is switch to glass containers instead of plastic containers. I mean, who really loves that out of control plastic container bin anyway? Just get rid of all the plastic containers and replace it with some nice glass containers. Yes, they've got plastic lids usually, but the plastic lids aren't necessarily always touching the food. The glass is. And so it's going to decrease the amount of chemicals in your kitchen.
Cast iron instead of Teflon or nonstick.
That's right.
Or stainless steel. Cast iron or stainless steel. Yeah.
I love my cast iron, guys.
Yeah.
That's what I use more than anything. I've got a stainless steel pan or two, and I just never use them because I love my cast iron so much. So
essential oils instead of the chemical air fresheners or things like
chemical air fresheners are so toxic, you guys. Really, we shouldn't be using them in our homes. And essential oils are such a healthy way to freshen your air in your home.
Used in moderation.
Yeah, but also it adds health benefits too.
Right.
So it's not just makes it smell better here, but it actually purifies the air and it builds our immune systems up. So why wouldn't we want to use essential oils instead?
Once again, used in moderation. You could get the concentration so high.
True.
Might not be too great.
Yep. One last thing is natural cleaners. There's a lot of companies that have started coming out with natural cleaners because there's been more and more awareness of healthier options. But you gotta look at the ingredients. Like most of these natural, healthy ingredients are just as toxic as the other toxic ones sitting on the shelf. Maybe they're just a hint better, but not by much, not enough to make the difference. In fact, when I was really, really sick in those 3 years when we were detoxing, it was funny because the natural dish soaps, because we tried so many different things to try and find something that would work. I couldn't wash dishes without my arms just breaking out in a rash, like all the way up to my elbows or beyond. And then it would stay for about a day until it would finally clear. Natural dish soaps were terrible. I would just break out so bad. There was only one brand I finally found. It was the Palmolive Free and Clear that I didn't personally react to, so I could do dishes. But now there's a lot of companies that are coming out with truly healthy, very natural dish soaps and laundry soaps and shampoos and conditioners that really there's so many options. You just have to do a little bit of research to find something that is healthier for your home.
So that's ways to reduce our exposure, but we're always going to have some exposure if you're living in society in modern civilization.
If you want to live a normal life, yes.
Then you're going to have some exposure. And so what can we do to help our bodies with dealing with this and eliminating the toxins and dealing with them and getting rid of them? So
I'm really sorry. I got to back up just for one quick second. Natural cleaners. There are a lot of really great DIY recipes. In fact, my toilet bowl cleaner is one that I make, and it works really well. And if you want that recipe, go and download that ebook I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, because the rest you'll find that recipe in there, along with several other recipes of things that we like to make for our home. So, ways to detox the body. Obviously, switch to more natural household options, but one of the biggest ways to help your body detox is actually sweating treatments, which there's a number of ways that you can do that.
You could move to the South.
That's true. That's true, and stay outside all day. Or you could do a sauna, like what we've got.
That's right. We really, really like our infrared sauna. There's a variety of different types of saunas and different ways that you can do it. And I haven't seen anything conclusive to convince me that one is any better than another. I think they might have slightly different effects, but they all can have a similar effect of, at least with our infrared sauna, what my understanding is that not only are you getting benefits, the normal benefits of sweating, but that it actually causes a different kind of sweating where it's better able to get the toxins into the sweat droplets and out of your skin and things like this. And, there's other benefits too as well, other types of saunas like the steam bath saunas, or I guess Swedish saunas are they called. Those are raising your body temperature, which that has a whole host of benefits for the immune system and things like that. Infrared sauna isn't doing that so much. It's more focused on detoxing and inflammation, reducing inflammation and things like that. But we really, really like ours. And believe it or not, we live off the grid and we don't have a huge solar system. As we've shared many times, our our modus operandi is to become as efficient as possible so that we don't have to build such a huge system. And even with that, we are able to run our infrared sauna. Ours uses about 1,000 watts, and we run it for like half an hour when we use it. And so, that's 1/2 of a kilowatt hour, and we just deal with it. And so we like to do it as often as possible in the spring, summer, and fall. We don't use it much in the summer because
It's too hot.
It's too hot, and we're doing a lot of sweating anyway in the summer.
Yes.
But spring, summer, and fall, if we try and do it, if not every other day, every day, don't always succeed, but
we try. Try being the operative word here.
Yeah.
Another way that you can do a sweating treatment at home if you don't have a sauna or you don't have access to a sauna, for example, would be to do a contrast shower. So a contrast shower would be hot and cold in the shower at the same, so alternating back and forth. So you would do 3 minutes hot as you can stand it, and then do 30 seconds as cold as you can stand it. And do that 3 times, always ending on the cold. If you can go 4 times, great. But 3 to 4 changes is what you want. And you can get a really good sweat and help increase your immune system's function and detoxify. So that's another way.
Another thing is charcoal or clay. I think there might be some other items that are commonly used with similar effects, but charcoal and clay, I think, are the 2 most popular binding agents for attaching to items, substances in your body, and then attaching to them at, what is it called, adsorbing, at least with charcoal. I'm not sure about clay, but it's adsorbing rather than absorbing.
Yeah, absorbing is like with a sponge. It kind of goes into it, but then you could squeeze the sponge and then everything, all the chemicals come right back out. With adsorbing, it's more of an adhering. So it just like the molecules adhere to each other.
Chemical bond.
There's a strong chemical bond that's not broken. And so adsorbing is when the charcoal attracts that negative chemical and then it neutralizes it in effect. And then it eliminates out of your system. So we actually, when my family was detoxing, we lived and breathed charcoal for 3 years. We were doing charcoal baths. We were drinking charcoal. We were, rash out, and I'd have to crawl into a bath just to get it under control. So charcoal really is a great detoxifier, but so is clay. Clay, much the same way. Another thing,
I try and take it on a daily basis, a little bit, small amount. You don't really want to take these kinds of, like charcoal, you don't really want to take it every day. It's more on an as needed basis generally. But with clay, I do, of course, this isn't medical advice. Thank you, FDA.
Yeah, that's right.
But I personally take like half a teaspoon a day. It's just a small amount and just helps with, so I've been told, helps with your body detoxing.
Yes, and another great detoxer would be greens. I can't fail to mention that because the greens, there are a number of greens that have a very profound detoxifying effect. They support your liver in dumping those toxins more effectively and more efficiently. And so there are specific greens. You can do your research, cilantro and dandelion, and just trying to think off the top of my head, but there's a number of greens that are really great for that. So something that we incorporate into our lifestyle on a regular basis is green drink. I found a green drink that I really like, and my kids like it. I mean, that's a huge win. And so we use that green drink. I incorporate it into smoothies or, as often as I can into our diet. So yeah, and there's a lot of other herbs too that help with detox. I'm thinking like lemon is a great detoxifier, red clover, milk thistle. They all support the liver and the detoxing processes of your body. So a splash of lemon juice in your water first thing in the morning is a great way to start your day.
Great.
So
Very good. Well, that was a lot of different things that we can do, and that we personally do a lot of those to try and detox. And I'm sure there's more that we could do. We're continually trying to improve and
That's right.
do better at all of that. You
That's
just do
right.
the best you can.
That's right. That's right. So, one other thing that I wanted to mention is that while you're detoxing, it's also really important to support your body. Your body is incredible the way that God designed it. And taking good care of your body is going to go a long ways to keeping your detoxing pathways clear. I'm thinking about things like simple whole foods. Like a lot of people eat a lot of processed foods. And it's not about what you shouldn't eat. It's more about what you should eat. Eat more greens, eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, eat more whole grains instead of all the processed food that we get. And you're going to notice a huge difference in your energy levels and in your mood too.
Yeah, that's good. Or, supplements, of course, are something that can be helpful.
A good multivitamin.
Yeah.
We've seen really good results.
That's right. I think you can take anything to extremes.
For sure.
And you can just take a boatload of supplements where it looks like some of these folks on a dozen different drugs, prescription drugs, and it starts to look that way. But in moderation and strategically taken, they can be a big help.
So besides your multivitamin, I got to suggest one more thing that is really beneficial, and that's probiotics. 100 years ago, homesteads had a cow or a goat that they would milk, and they would use that milk in their kitchen.
Raw.
Raw. They'd make their own cottage cheese or raw milk or raw butter. And that was just a part of their daily routine.
They were getting probiotics from that.
Yeah, and those are loaded with healthy probiotics. But then what happened was we fast forward to mass production, and we run into a major issue.
Pasteurization.
Well, the issue was actually bad bacteria, because there was all of this, beneficial bacteria in the milk. When you mass produce it, then you can end up with a situation where the bad bacteria can take over.
Or unsanitary conditions.
Or
can
unsanitary.
That.
That's right. Unsanitary. There's so many different things. So then we introduced pasteurization. Pasteurization kills all of the good bacteria as well as the bad bacteria that might have gone into the milk. And so now, for the most part in our society, we're not getting all of those healthy, good bacteria in our system on a daily basis. And our bodies need that. So unless you have a cow and you're milking your cow and making your own cheese and butter, which if you are, kudos to you, then you really should find a really good quality probiotic to use on a regular basis. That is going to help boost your immune system function and your overall health too.
Yeah. And then, of course, greens, like you mentioned earlier, Yep. That's great for supporting your body.
Absolutely.
Immune system is really key. There's some herbs that can be really helpful for that, right?
Yeah, I use astragalus and pau d'arco. Those are the two that I primarily use in teas. And then also there's vitamin D, which there's a lot of awareness about that. Vitamin C helps support your immune system. I'm trying to think of zinc. There's a lot of different things that you can do to help. If you're doing a multivitamin, you're going to be getting some of those in your multivitamin. But if you live in northern climates, then I would recommend supplementing even more in the vitamin D. And maybe
we should say that's what we do.
There we go. That's what we do. Thank you.
And then, of course, exercise. If there's one thing that has perhaps more benefit than any of the other things, I think exercise has to be it, because exercise can help you to undo some of the bad stuff. But so not only does it have a positive effect, but it can also help to undo some of the bad stuff or neutralize it and make it not quite so bad.
You can even eat not the greatest diet, and if you exercise really well, it can make a difference. But if you combine exercise with a good diet and all of these other things, it really makes the difference.
Yeah, and water.
Water, water, water. We are so dehydrated. And I'm not talking about drinking juices and sodas and, whatever else it is that you like to drink. I'm talking about water. Try washing a load of laundry in 1 gallon of water. Your clothes are not going to get clean. There's not a chance. And water is the universal cleansing agent. So if you want to talk about detoxing, drink water.
Yep.
Drink, 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 drink. Our bodies are made up of 60 to 75% water. Just water. So it being the most important lubricant, you really need to drink more water.
Yep. And of course, stress is a killer.
That's right.
And the number one primary way for eliminating stress is trust in God.
That's right.
Do the best you can and leave the rest in God's hands.
That's right.
That's how we try and deal with stress.
That's right.
Anyhow, I know that's a lot of different things, but it's something that's near and dear to our family topic that has had a profound impact and continues to.
That's right.
When you experience some of these health challenges, they have an effect for many years, perhaps the rest of your life to some extent. To this day, Lisa is my canary. When, we have a pretty good idea of whether somewhere is toxic or not, because if it's pretty bad, then she starts having symptoms. And it's like, well, that can be a blessing,
Yeah, it
because
can.
then the rest of us aren't just in ignorance, exposing ourselves for long periods of time to unseen dangers,
Yeah,
So
it's very true.
anyhow, I hope this has been helpful and that you've gotten some really useful tidbits here that will help you in making your home, your country home, your little homestead as clean as possible, because few things send shivers down my spine like somebody moving out to a pristine, clean area and then creating their own little toxic bubble there. That just seems wrong.
Yes.
And so just wish you all the success as you work to clean up your home and provide your family with a little bubble of purity and safety as much as possible.
That's right. Well, thanks so much, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye now.